want to welcome everyone to our Hashing Over History today. Again, the Sesquicentennial Hashing Over History event, partnership with the Thousand Islands Museum, the Historian's Office, the Sesquicentennial team, and the Clayton Opera House. If you don't know this already, the Sesquicentennial, the actual 150th, is April 17th. So we're getting pretty close to that date. It's only about 7 weeks away. So April 17th, it's Easter. Yeah, it is Easter, so we're going to celebrate that way. All right? But 150 years, we've seen a lot of things. Not all of us, all 150 years, but a lot of things have happened over the years. And we have several different committees that are doing different things. We got the chronology. We have a team that's putting together all the major things that have happened through the years. That's one of the things. There's newspaper articles that are going to hopefully be seen in the paper here shortly, talking about all the good things VIPs did through the years. We got the wonderful Corbin Studio Collection Gallery that's up. Thank you for that. So there's things happening. We got more plans. We're going to be looking to do a reenactment on July 23rd of the signing of the village charter. So that's forthcoming. We got some walking tours, and there's again just more things that are in the plans. But today we got Wilburt Wahl, and I had an opportunity to go to Wilburt's office about 3 months ago when I asked him to do this, and I was just amazed. I sat back and listened, and he's got so many stories, and I'm thankful that somebody made a suggestion that I ask him to speak. He's been around Clayton for a lot of years. He's seen a lot of things. He's made a lot of things happen himself. So with today's Hashing Over History, Wilbur, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Well, Clayton's been changed a lot. Little time that I've been here, and I'm coming up 90, so I guess it's pretty close. So one of the things that I remember is that happened here that a long time ago, and that's Matty Pananen. I don't know whether you know him or not. He didn't have any fingerprints or anything on his hands when I knew him, and I found out why. Is that he got drunk in McCormick's there and started to walk home. Of course, he lived on the island, on the head of the island, and he fell through the ice. And he fell through the ice, and he reached out, put his hands on the ice, and froze his hands solid, and pulled himself out of the water that way. And when he had to lift his hands, of course, it took off his skin. And that's that's the reason he never had any fingerprints. He was a real tough Finn, that's for sure. So that's just one of the things. I just want to mention here several of the businesses that were in town that we probably forget about. One is the Ellis Building. That's where the pharmacy was. McCormick's Restaurant. Schaefer's Grocery. Remember Schaefer's Grocery on the main street, James Street, and that was a nice place to get food. And then there's a Hubbard House, and of course Carl Frank and Snowplow, and the coal dock and the railroad terminals. Of course, that's big thing here. And do you remember the boats would come in here and they'd throw coins in, and everybody dive for the coins? I'll bet there's a lot of coins out there yet, because they sure didn't get them all. And there's ice racing on the bay out here. And the last time that they had the ice racing, the whole chunk of ice sunk. And so they ran all the cars off to the west, and then they came out one or two at a time on the east, because that brought the cake of ice up, and that was the last time they had ice racing.
What year was that?
Damned if I know.
Were those cars or were they iceboats?
No, there were cars.
They're cars.
Cars were all over it.
Okay.
You had all kinds of cars over there. But they all ran over to the west, and that brought the ice cake up on Grave Street so they could come off the thing here. And then, of course, there was Kittle Motors and Mercer's. And there's a 5 and 10 cent store where Kennedy Pharmacy is, and then now there's something else there. If you remember, before McCormick's was built, there was a rope walk there. That's something that I remember as a very small kid. So it would be back in 1933 or something like that, 34. And they'd made rope there. And the town boat tickets were, of course, they were hawked on the road for the island tours. And then there was Thousand Island Marina, and that's where the casino was. There was a casino there, and then there's Thousand Island Marina. And then there was GLF, where Hunter's Market is right now. And they sold feed for the cows, and the keepers, I forget his name. I remember him walking out with 100 pounds on each shoulder.
Bob Meeks.
What?
Bob Meeks.
Bob Meeks?
Bob Meeks.
No, before him.
Randall?
Crandall, that's right. That's the right name.
Randall.
Yeah, and I remember him throwing 100 pounds on each shoulder, walking right out the car with it. And the knitting mill, and of course, maybe quite a few of you were employed there, I don't know. But that of course was quite a major part of Clayton. Brooks Lumberyard, and then Kennedy Pharmacy, and the Clan Woolens, and Thousand Island Inn, Corbin's of course, and there was a barber shop right next to it. And then the Grand Union, we called it the Grand Onion. Right. And the American Market, Hungerford Harbor, and then Ozzie Steele's gun shop up on the corner, and Finney's gas station was a gas station. It still is, but it did repairs there. And then there's Graphic Controls. That was another thing that was a thing. And there's B&D Market. And we called them Grabby, but there was a grocery store on State Street there. I don't remember his name. No, not the B&D. No, one right down here on going toward Cape Vincent, from Gayhead toward Cape Vincent.
Bernie Consol.
Barry Consol, right. And there's Dr. Bill Pell and Dr. Fox. And let's see, Wingrath Brothers, of course. All those businesses were the mainstay of Clayton at one time. I don't know, maybe you can remember some other ones. I can't remember. I wrote down what I could think of. And that's for 90 years, or nearly 90 years. And I remember the one thing that was interesting to me when I started to reminisce about this was the fact that my mother took me past the rope bar, or the rope walk down where McCormick's is, and where they would twist the rope to make rope. And there's a bakery down there at the end of that street. I don't know who owned that, or maybe somebody could help me on that. But that was right at the end of Riverside Drive. That burned down, among other things. And So those are the businesses of the village that I remember. That used to be, of course, that was the mainstay of Clayton at that time. But maybe some of you people would be able to remember other ones that I don't think of.
Were you born in Clayton?
No, I was born in Buffalo. I moved here when I was 2 years old.
2 years.
Born, but I was Claytonite ever since. That was quite a while ago, of course. And one of the things that I remember very much is I was a beekeeper with my father. And I got into the log business, and I was selling veneer logs to Europe, and I sold quite a few of them. And in fact, I opened a harbor at Ogdensburg and provided the first 8 shiploads of logs. And 2 of the guys that I worked with are Mr. Binnick and Mr. Goose, and they spoke German all the time, and I didn't understand it, of course, at that time. So my grandparents spoke German, but I couldn't make out what they were talking about. I figured if I was going to keep my shirt, well, I had better learn the language. So I went to Watertown, and I tried to find a German teacher. And there was Nina Coleman was in Robinson Bookstore, and she used to teach German, so I went to look for her. And she said, well, I don't remember anything about it anymore, but there was a German girl in here a few minutes ago looking for a Bible. So she looked in a waste paper can and came out with the address. And she gave it to me, and I said, that's fine. And here comes a guy with a cart that dumped the trash bag, so that's how close it was.
Yeah.
And so I took the address, and I went looking for her, and that was my beautiful wife here. And she opened the door, and boy, that was quite a long years by that time, 27, I guess 26. And I figured she was the one for me, so we got married, and I learned the language. So that was the best damn thing that ever happened there.
Where did you live?
1020 State Street.
Could you tell us a little bit about logging? I heard at one time that you used to be involved in log drives where you would, with a barge, you would take logs down the river.
Yeah, we did 2 things. One, as I say, the round logs, we opened the harbor at Ogdensburg with, and got pictures of the ships. There was most there, and my customer bought one of those ships and kept sending it over here. I'd fill it full of logs, and he'd go back over there, and then he'd load up veneer there, and he'd unload at Richmond, and then he'd come up here and get another load.
Now, were these logs on barges, or were they boomed?
No, we brought them in on trucks.
Barge? Oh, you moved them on trucks.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't move them by water.
Oh yeah, I brought logs off of Grindstone Island here and things like that.
But would you put them on a barge, or did you boom them?
No, we put them on a barge.
Okay.
Those were elm logs primarily at that time. And I bought a lot of logs up near Madrid and down in that area, elm logs. Of course, elm are all gone now with the disease, but at that time they were just going. And I remember a number of instances of cutting logs where it's a wonder I'm here. But that was, we also I logged the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. We got logs out of the bottom of the river, quite a few from right out here in front. That originally they would float, those were all white oak. They were originally square timbers, and they were tied together with pine so that they would float. And sometimes, and they were bound together with willow withes, and of course they came apart occasionally, and that's where how come the logs are down there. I picked up logs and found a skeleton underneath one of them.
Oh.
Rockport Harbor.
Where?
Rockport Harbor,
Oh,
right across
okay.
here. They didn't bother with the guy, they figured it was too late anyway, so they just left him there, I guess. But all through here, I brought logs up. There's a hole over here, off of Clayton, toward the park, or toward the buoy over there. It's quite deep, and there's quite a few logs in that. There were.
So I saw pictures of some of these square logs that were brought up, and I often wondered, how did they sink? Because my knowledge tells me that logs don't sink.
Those logs will sink. A white oak log will sink. A pine does not sink, and so they bound it always together with pine to keep it float. But if they got loose, they sunk rapidly.
Where did they come from before they sunk?
Where did they come from? All around here, and back when Bonaparte was going to come over this country and there, they would ship them. They'd ship them on sailing ships. They came up, they barged them down to, or floated them in rafts down to the other side of Waddington to get onto the ships at that time. And we have one of those logs in our home, and it makes a good platter. My wife grows plants there next to the window, and it works very well, but
It
it's
took
right
two cranes. It took 2 cranes to bring this piece of log.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes,
in.
Two cranes did.
When we built the addition on the house,
it's 16
32
inches
feet.
by 20,
Yeah, big one.
20 feet.
And but we shipped those, they were, what is incidental and very interesting is, I shipped those logs to Germany, and they went to repair and to fix churches that were built, that were bombed in the last war. And in other words, these logs here that were originally intended for there and didn't make it the first time, made it the second time. And one of them is the Frauenkirche in Dresden. We contributed two timbers to that.
Huh. Was your father a lumberman too?
No, we were beekeepers. We came from Buffalo, and we came to this area primarily because of the white clover. At that time, all the farmers had white clover, and you grew white clover in the fields and pastures. You don't see that anymore, but at that time it gives a very water white honey, and that was much in demand, and that's very tasty. And for that reason, we came to this part of the country.
How old were you when you first got into the lumber business?
Oh, 18. I started in the lumber business about 18, so I figure from 1932 to 18 years I started as a sawmill, and the idea at that time was to make pine beehives that were 3 inches thick, because we spent a quarter of the year to pack the bees and unpack the bees, and by building beehives that thick, we'd say that worked. We wouldn't have to work that much of the time. Unfortunately, it didn't work. It worked out, but we didn't cover that many bees with it. I sold the sawmill to a merchant over in 3 Mile Bay, but because it was not as profitable as to selling the logs, I got into the veneer business, and I sold considerable white oak, red oak, and maple, and elm. Of course, elm was the big thing at the time. We shipped many shiploads of logs.
Mhm.
I remember that we had there's on a ship there's called a plimsoll mark. It's how far down a ship can go before you're not supposed to put anything more into it, and they call those plimsoll marks. And it's on the side of the ship and on the front of the ship, and we'd watch there when we start loading the ships how far down we go. We had to cut it off, stop loading when we got down that far. So we did that. Any other questions?
Was there any American chestnut growing up here or sunk in the river?
There's no chestnut sunk that I have found, and we never found any in the woods. White oak, yes. There was a number of white oak in the area, and is known for that, and we shipped a lot of that.
So I have 2 questions. And the first one is, you must have been a young man during World War II. I don't even know if you served, but if you didn't serve, what was it like in Clayton during the war? And
I remember I went to school here in Clayton, and I remember the day the war ended. I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
And I remember coming over a loudspeaker that the war had ended, and that there was armistice was being signed, and that was a great day for the school.
And then I'd like to ask about how did you get into the marina business, and talk a little bit about your marina.
I came across the bridge going to the woods, and I knew that I couldn't physically be a lumberman all my life, and I'm damn glad I didn't, because I can't anymore. But I looked over there, and that was all cattails and marsh at that time, and I looked over at the marina, and I said, that was for me, and I had a mental picture of exactly what I would build there, and that started the fight, and I built the marina there, and I didn't have any trouble with the buildings, but I had trouble dredging out, and I think I spent half my time in court trying to get that, and now the state coming after all that, the state came and dredged out the rest of it.
Bill, what about Uncle Ock and the boat building?
Well, he built several boats, my uncle, and he built a big boat that I've got at the marina yet. I've got an engine in it, I never got it in the water, so I'm always busy putting the marina together.
Is that the one that's down, what you call it, the cave or the cavern or something like that?
No, it's inside the building.
Okay, because you showed me a boat once that you built. At least I heard that you built it, and it was in
No, that's
place with the
so
snow.
across the breakwater that I've got, there's the base or the bottom of the, what's the name of that place? It's a houseboat, great houseboat, great big houseboat.
Okay.
They brought that in there and they sunk it in there. I forget what the name of that houseboat was. They put a new bottom on it. Eventually, it's wound up here at the Antique Boat Museum.
That's right. Oh, the Duchess?
The Duchess, that's right.
Chess.
Duchess, yeah. Well, that's the old bottom of it.
You worked with Surreal Keys, and you bought a boat there. I was thinking about the docks that you built with logs that you had got.
Yeah,
that you bought.
yeah, no, that's not the way.
Well, they got you into the marina because you had some boats.
Well, yeah, I had another boat, you know. We were getting logs off of the island at the time, and I had several boats from Hutchinson Boat Works at that time, and I kept them down at Thousand Island Marina, and I remember one time we went over with the crew to work, and we cut logs all day, and it got stormy, and it got more stormy, and it still got more stormy. And we came back, and I'd hired a new fellow. We came back to Brooks Lumber Yard. The guy jumped off the boat, kissed the ground, and he ran off, and I never saw him again. I never came got food or his pay or anything.
What year did you start the marina? Did you end?
I started in 1956.
Okay.
I'd worked in the lumber yard, and as I say, I knew I couldn't be a lumberman all my life, and I'm glad I did.
Hey Wilbur, when I came to your office a couple months ago, you were telling me that you were very knowledgeable, obviously, in boat motors and things, and you were telling a story to me about a gentleman, I think it was over in the East China Sea, and he needed a part. Do you remember that story?
Oh yes, we had running a marina for quite a while. One of the engines was a MD-11C, which was a diesel engine in a sailboat. And I got a telephone call via the Skype that went up, came down, guy from the middle of the Pacific Ocean. He said that his motor would run, but it wouldn't go anywhere. He couldn't put it in gear, it couldn't run anymore, So he called Volvo, and Volvo couldn't help, and they told him to get a hold of me. So I said what kind of engine was, and he said MD-11C, which was a two-cylinder diesel engine. And I told him, I said, on the back, go down next to the engine, and he did. And I said, now on the back of the engine, there's a plate, it's got 5 bolts in it. Take that 5 bolts up right next to a brass button. Yep, I found it. All right, take that plate off. He did. Now I said, inside of that, you'll find on the left-hand side a boss with a hole in it, and the right-hand side a lever with a hole in it. There should be a spring that connects those two. There isn't at this point. You're right, he said. Well, I said, reach down with something and try and fish what's left of that spring out. Well, he got a hold of it. Now I said, hook it, make a new tang on it, and hook it into those two where those holes are. He did. Now I said, it'll run, fine. Oh, it does run. And you say, very happy. Okay. I said, you put the plate back on, you're set to go. Unfortunately, Federal Express does not deliver out the middle Pacific Ocean, but I'll send you a new spring, you'll need a new spring. It's $1.95. And, I said, if your nearest landfall, I think, is in Samoa. So you get me an address there and I'll send you the spring, which we did.
Wow. Did you ever hear from him again?
No, I never saw him again. I never heard from him again. But things like that's happen every day. I get calls from all over the world on that. We have a parts inventory second to none in the country.
We know that.
We were looking for a serpentine belt one time, and it was on a weekend, and you weren't open, so we didn't come over. So we started any place that we could get somebody to answer the phone in a marina in the North Country. No one had one, and it was 4th of July weekend, and disappointed that we couldn't go out. Just by chance, I drove over across to your place, and you happened to come down, and of course you had one. You had 3 of them.
I had an experience like that
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and a guy across the street did mechanic work, and he came right over as a favor. We had helped him with something the year before. He said, I'll be glad to come. I'll be right over. So by Saturday noon, we had the boat going.
And it was we as I say, we all over the world from Germany through Eastern Europe or Western Europe and South America. I don't go into China and I don't go into Russia.
Don't blame you.
Blue and gold, blue and gold.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you got stories about all those anchors you collect.
I'm sorry. Oh, the anchors that I
Yeah, all
collect.
the anchors you collect. You
Yeah,
got
well,
stories.
I've collected anchors all my life, pretty near, and we've got quite an extensive collection of anchors, all kinds of them.
You got any particular stories about one that was more interesting than the rest?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I do. I was told not to talk about that, but one anchor that I have belongs to a German submarine. It's got a swastika on it, and it's in my collection that I showed. And the submarine is between here and Cape Vincent, I'm sure, but I can't find it. And I've looked for it. We took an airplane. You can see a lot from an airplane. We did not see the submarine from the airplane, but we found a whole bunch of other boats that I didn't know about.
Wow.
They're all sunk, especially along Wolf Island. There's quite a few. I think that the submarine was covered up when they built the seaway. They came up, at Waddington, the water's 14 feet deep. Canada has a picture of that submarine, along with another submarine, coming up through that thing before, at that time. Well, I went up there to get a copy of it to see what it was. You could see on the wall where it was, but they wouldn't tell me anything about it. But the other submarine, as far as I know, was sunk in Lake Ontario, in quite deep water. This one here laid alongside of a shoal down where I live. When I came home I was 10 years old. And I came at it because this happened in 1942. And I heard boom, boom, boom. And I asked my mother what that was, and she was hanging up clothes outside. So she said, somebody's blasting. I went up the house and I looked across the river and I saw a plane, and I could see a thing drop from the plane, and you'd see a geyser, then you'd hear the boom. And what's going on? Oh, so, well, we went back in there after I was about 18, 19 years old, and we got one anchor there, and it's a submarine anchor. There's another anchor there, we know where it is, but I haven't brought it up yet. There are two anchors, and they're both submarine anchors, and that's where
This is down by Sand Bay.
roughly there, but out from Sand Bay, there's a red marker, and it's right there is a shoal. And it laid alongside that shoal, thought it wouldn't be found. But they did find it. They didn't have anything to bomb it with at that time, so they had a special dispensation. There was a between Canada and the United States that anything that came in here that needed bombing would be bombed by Canada. And those planes came from the Kingston Trenton Air Force Base, right next to Kingston. And all they had was target bombs. They didn't have any big bombs, so all they had was target bombs. So they knocked off those anchors, but they didn't damage the sub. The sub went down, and I think the sub is out here near Blanket Island. That's where I think it is. But the two anchors are down by Linda Island. And I got one of them. Well, one anchor's not down there anymore, it's here. But that anchor is I've got it on display.
Now, how did you bring an anchor up? I mean,
With an airbag.
with an airbag?
Yeah, you fasten it, and that's the same way we brought the timbers up.
Okay.
We fastened a airbag to it, and you take it down uninflated, fasten it on, and then you take your tank from your dive system, you take one of the hoses and you take one of the anchors, and it doesn't take much.
So this is a hard hat dive?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's
Scuba?
yeah, scuba diving.
Okay.
And, but you use two tanks, and one tank is for breathing and the other tank is for this. And we take that down and squirt air into the tank, and pretty soon she comes out.
Didn't you have,
Sometimes it doesn't come all the way up, but it's up to the surface. It comes up to the surface, where the air tank or the airbag is to the surface, and below it is fastened to what we're bringing up, whether it's a anchor or timber or whatever. That comes up and we bring it into that far to shore, and when we get it to shore, then we send somebody out there with a cable and bring it in the rest of the way and bring it out with a crane.
So you were a scuba diver too then?
Yeah, but my son does a lot of that. I didn't do too much of it. Used to, but long time ago.
Is that Heinz or Walt?
Heinz, yes.
Okay.
did you have some life jackets too that you thought came from that? Did you have some life jackets that were thought maybe had come from that?
Yes, we still have some life jackets that are made of cork instead of the stuff that they use now.
That they might have come from that?
I don't know. They came. That's all I know.
How many anchors do you have?
Hundreds.
I wonder.
And they're on display? I mean, we're...
I have a display, yes. But it was only the big ones, because we had a couple of incidents where they helped themselves to the anchor display.
No.
In fact, there's one guy I caught, but yeah, he's still alive.
I was going to ask you, he's still alive.
The anchor at the corner of Strawberry and Wall, is there a story about that anchor?
Well, those are well, I had an opportunity to buy the cranes down in Land Falls, to a paper mill down there. They were going out of business, and I brought the cranes back, and those are the tools that are used for that. One is a rock grapple, and one is a regular clamp. And that's all. But my original idea was to find that submarine and bring it in.
I want to ask, so you were in the marina business, who were your main competitors, and did you work together with the other marinas, or were you?
Oh, it's a lot better to have the parts and work with them than to be antagonistic. We worked very well with Hutchinson's and all of them, Mercer's, Chalks at Fisher's Landing. It's a lot more sensible to work with somebody.
I do agree.
The marina that was on the site where the antique boat museum is now, they were a Chris Craft dealer at one time.
You mean Mercer's?
Yes, Mercer's.
Mercer's, yes.
Were they a competitor,
No, I mean,
or was that before your?
well, when we first started out, the first year I had one boat. That guy had bought $50,000 worth of gravel from, and that he rented a dock for a year. But no, we catered to a different style boat than Mercer's did, or French Bay does at the present time.
Okay.
They primarily are a larger boat that doesn't get under the bridge, and the bridge, of course, is a governing factor to that. Is any boat that is bigger than that bridge, I can't get under the bridge.
Okay.
Do you think the state will never change their mind, will they, on that?
Oh yeah, they're talking about it.
Are they really?
Yeah, I've seen the drawings. That's a reconditioning. At that time, they reconditioned that whole bunches of the State Street there, straightened the curves out for the bridge and so forth. And at that time, and I saw that when Charlie Lyman was still president. But if anything would have happened then, he was glad because he had a boat at our place.
No, one other reason, that's a very dangerous curve. There's been more accidents on that curve. Plus, it would give everybody that is that side of the bridge, if they change it and made fire.
See to straighten that bridge out, well, there's a picture of it before the bridge.
Yeah.
By the way, it looked like this at one time, and then they put in a 3-span metal bridge. And the middle span of that is the span that goes over the Black River at Brownville.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's the middle span. I don't know what happened to the other 2 spans, but that span I know came from Clayton.
Maybe they're in reserve and that's what they're gonna replace the one that's bad and down the road.
Yeah, they're talking about replacing that, yeah.
Let's bring it back to Clayton.
I'd like to see a large
Yeah.
bridge there, high bridge.
It would slow the traffic down right through.
Well, not only that, but that bridge is illegal. The fact that we have boats as far as Frontenac Springs, it shows that's all navigable water. And any bridge over navigable water is supposed to be 28 feet, something like that, high. But that was only a 7.
How high is the current bridge?
And high water is 7.
7.
7.5, about 8.5 feet. Any boat at 8.5 feet can make it.
So very small crafts only can go under there, yeah.
It's marked off levels underneath the bridge on the cement.
When you were growing up,
did you go to Canada ever, or very often, and what was it like to go to another country at that time as opposed to what you have to go through now?
Oh, shoot, we go over there anytime we wanted to. You just run across.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was never any big fuss to do at the border at that time. As long as you brought the money along, that's all they worried about.
Did you know of any of the bootlegging that went on?
I'm sorry?
The bootlegging that went on?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's another whole story. Clayton used to be a big section of that.
Yeah.
And,
Our relatives.
and it used to come up, and the whiskey and liquor would come across the head grindstone.
Yeah.
And in Buck Bay, we found a cask full of, we thought it was whiskey, but it wasn't. It was only water. But it was a regular cask, you know, and we thought somebody had dumped it over. They used to hang out in Buck Bay. People used to hang out in Buck Bay until the revenuers were looking somewhere else. Then they run over here to Clayton. Yeah, and that was quite a bit. And of course, grindstone you didn't make any difference to, but Clayton and the inland, it was very, very difficult to transport liquor.
A lot of people in the area during that time period got quite wealthy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Some well-known people, names too.
Yeah.
We had a shoal, or it wasn't really a shoal, I guess it was a marker that a lot of the locals used, some of the fishing guides or whatever, and did one of our props in, and it was between Canoe Point and Picnic Point. And when we finally got back home, Norm Seymour lived next door, and he laughed and laughed, and he says, well, you know what you hit? He said that was one of their drop points, that if they were coming through that way from Canada and they had a supply of bottles of booze, and if they saw somebody coming that they thought might be the police, they had that thing with a marker, and they just dumped it in a bag over, and when it was clear, they went back and picked it back up again.
Do you remember the Singapore trader that hit there?
Oh.
Well,
Yeah, out here.
we took, it was on Blanket Island.
Oh,
And there was I can't remember the time exactly, but they went ashore there, and it was my blessing or what, to take care of him. And I was engaged to take service. And there was a number of people on that thing that couldn't get off onto land. And I brought all the officers in we went to dinner at home. And when they finally took this Singapore trader off of that island, they unloaded it, and of course everybody in Clayton got rich because of that at that time, because the stuff disappeared from the ship and came into this city. So the Singapore trader, they eventually towed out of here to Taiwan to cut up for scrap. And when they got to Montreal, they invited me, I think my wife Sonia, and we all sat at a table in one of the places down there, and they treated us to a meal.
wow.
But I go over there at any time of the day or night to take care of them for one reason or other, medical terms and so forth. It was amazing. One of the I took care of one of the stevedores, which was, he had a medical problem, and the poor guy didn't have a nickel, you know, and he wanted to pay me, and he wanted to give me umbrella? No, that was the one that wanted to give us an umbrella.
Oh, yes.
And that was all he had to give anybody. I mean, that was a tough thing. But he took care of it. You know, you get a real good idea of the other side of the world. Between that and loading the logs there, the ships that we loaded to on were, I remember one time we loaded the ship with logs, and it was supposed to go to Bremen. And before it got to Bremen, the company went bankrupt. And they notified me that all the ship and the logs would be sold at auction in the first landfall. And my customer was in India at the time, and I got a hold of him finally, and I told him, I said, look, they're going to sell the logs that you paid for here at the first landfall. Don't worry about it, he said. He'll say it. His name was Carl Rudolph. And he attended the auction, he bought the whole works, and hired the crew. And took the ship, they sent the ship back for another load here to me, and that ship ran that triangle for years. Wow. Until one day it didn't show up anymore. Other ships showed up. I asked him what happened. Oh, he said, I sold it. He paid $1 million for the whole thing. He bought it and he sold the ship for $2.5 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What you can do when you got a lot of money.
So I got one last question for me anyway. So you've seen a lot of changes over the years, you know, in the area. What would you say is the biggest change for the good, and maybe what's the biggest change for the bad in this area? Maybe I'm throwing you on the spot.
Well, I see the town and as a whole growing, and is known for being one of the best growing places in the United States. And that's good as far as I can see. The bad part, I'd say, would be regulations. That's my personal opinion. Too much over-regulation. A little regulation is a good thing, but too much is too much.
Any other questions? Okay, well, let me slide on in here and over. It's been great having you today. I do have a appreciation certificate on behalf of the Sesquicentennial team. So this is one more thing you can display down at your office if you care to. But I'm going to get a little look at the camera over there.